This is Dr. Dan Margolin with The Other Side of Adversity. I'm very excited to have our guest, David Hollingsworth. David, your story is a real comeback story. So you were involved in a motorcycle accident in which you broke your spine.
Yep.
You were confined to a wheelchair,
Yep.
and then you recovered and ran a marathon. Amazing. What an inspirational story. You wrote a book about it. And
Yep.
right now we'll edit it in, but we'll show the cover of that book. And when is the book come out, Dave?
It'll be sometime in mid to late November. We're trying to get it out before the holidays. And the book is written. We're done with editing. We're just doing the final layout touches before we put it to production.
And David, so how long did it take you to recover from? Well, take us back to the accident.
Sure.
What happened?
Sure. This is in summer of 2004. I was learning how to ride a motorcycle. And it wasn't, a lot of guys who want to go out and ride a motorcycle, they'll go out and get a Harley Davidson, some big cruiser bike. This was a Honda Rebel T, so not really the big beefy type of bike other people would ride. And I was doing all the things that I thought would be safe and smart. You had a helmet, gloves, jacket, boots, the whole 9 yards, and it was practicing riding in my neighborhood. So trying to be very safe with it. One day when I was practicing, I was in a local school parking lot and just going back and forth. And one time when I was going back and forth, I hit a patch of sand while I was on the bike and started to lose my balance. And if you lose your balance, sometimes you grab onto whatever's closest to you.
Right.
I happen to be right-handed, and so I grabbed the throttle, shot the bike forward, and before I could get on the clutch and the brake, I bounced on the curb with the front wheel, which knocked me up and off the bike, and I landed right on the corner of a curb, which fractured my L2 vertebra. And according to the ER report, it was an explosive burst fracture on 3 axes with 60% compression of the spinal canal. My right leg was initially paralyzed, and they had to stabilize me for 48 hours before they could do surgery.
David,
Surgery.
Did
Yes.
you realize that you were paralyzed immediately? Was it like one of those things where you went, "Oh my God, this is really bad," or it took a while to realize that?
As soon as I hit the ground, I knew it was really bad. But I did the whole, I knew if you get hurt, you shouldn't try to move anything. And while a bystander saw me, it was kind of getting me to stay still, and they called 911. I was going through a mental inventory of, okay, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, and left toes worked fine, and then the right just didn't work.
Oh.
And so I knew it was bad. And so paramedics came, put a cervical collar on me, put me on a backboard. And they immobilized me for 48 hours before surgery. And right prior to surgery, the doctor said, "We're going to do everything we can," which is always a scary phrase to hear.
Absolutely. Especially you were healthy before this.
Yeah.
Now, what made you want to start riding a motorcycle, if I might ask?
I think it's the typical midlife crisis type, go do an adventure type thing.
Right.
And I was trying to be smart about it and be safe about it, but sometimes life happens. And immediately prior to surgery, the doctor said, "I don't know if you're going to be able to walk again." So 7.5 hour surgery. They did a 4-level fusion from T12 to L3. Did a bone graft from my hip. Did a laminectomy. And after surgery, I could feel my right leg because they opened up the pressure on the spinal canal, and that was.
So you did know right away that there was some relief.
There was some relief. I could feel. What I couldn't do was stand. They had bolted me together, and I had to wear a TLSO brace, which went from my armpits down to my hips. And I was pretty much immobilized for a couple months where I needed to
So
get.
you couldn't stand. You mean because of the bracing or because of paralysis or?
Because of a number of things. One is just the trauma of surgery. Because once they do bolt you together, you need to heal for at least a few weeks before they can even attempt to move you.
So Dave, when you come out of this surgery, what does the surgeon say to you? Does he say, you know what, you're going to be able to run or walk again? Or he says, we're not sure, we're just waiting?
What the surgeon said was they did some tests and I had feeling in my leg. And he said the surgery was successful. We were able to do the fusion. We were able to relieve the pressure in your spinal canal. And let's see how things improve.
So there's still that let's see there, though. It wasn't
yeah. There were no guarantees
it wasn't like you're going to write a book and you're going to run a marathon.
No.
You're going to be on the podcast, The Other Side of Adversity. He didn't say that to you, my friend.
No, none of those good things happened. It was kind of a wait and see. And I was in the hospital for 2.5 months post-surgery, where each day there'd be little things that would improve. We did a lot of physical therapy to get my strength built back up. And it wasn't until about a week before I left the hospital that I could actually walk a few steps. So
tell us about that. The first time you stood up and actually started walking, did you break open the champagne? Was it very painful and tiring, or what was that like?
There was a lot of swearing involved. I had to, they do a lot of things to build up strength so you can get into that position. And things from, they have parallel bars that you can support your weight on. And they have aids that will help you support your weight. So I had to go the parallel bars first and kind of helping myself with my hands, and then graduating to a walker, and then graduating to a cane. And then about a few days before I left the hospital, I had my the nurse who had been with me since the beginning. She never saw me in physical therapy, but I wheeled my chair up to her and said, "Hey, I want to show you something." So I locked the wheels into place, pushed myself up, and then very slowly took step by step around the nurse's station, came back and sat down in the chair. And I looked up and she had tears in her eyes. Because she saw the shape that I was when I came in. So when I left the hospital, I could walk about 20 feet.
Now, were you an athlete prior to this? I mean, this concept of running a marathon, was that something you had done before the injury, or?
Well, I ran track and cross country in high school. And in 1989, I ran the New York City Marathon. And I did the Marine Corps Marathon in 94. But this is now, after that, I, got married, had kids, and this is 20 years after I had done anything major physically. So at the time, I was a typical suburban dad and didn't do a lot.
David,
how
old were you when this injury happened?
I was 43. Okay. And for the next few years after that, I didn't do a lot. I was able to walk again. I learned how to ride a bike again. But the idea of running really didn't enter my mind until about 8 years after the accident. Because of being sedentary, I had gained a significant amount of weight. And it was around Thanksgiving of 2012. I was kind of tired of being tired and decided that I wanted to do something different.
Right after eating that last piece of turkey, yeah?
Yeah, actually, I did pretty good that Thanksgiving, but I knew I needed to make a change. And I got serious about watching what I ate and asked my doctor, I said, "Can I run?" And he said, "Yeah, if somebody's chasing you." So I did the smart thing. I signed up for a 5K, just to make sure there'd be somebody chasing me. And went out and actually tried to run for the first time since before the accident. And I jogged about 60 feet. And that was all I could do.
I guess the alternative was don't pay his bill and he'll chase you, right?
That's true. Or at least pay a collection agency to chase me. And over the next few months, I would, every time I'd go out and I'd jog a little bit further. I'd like jog 60, walk 60, jog 60, walk 60. And by March of 2013, I was able to run my first 5K. And I had fun doing it. And so I wanted to see, could I go further? And over the 6 months after that, I'd go from a 5K to a 5 miler. Then I did a 10K. And by November of 2013, I was able to run the Indianapolis Monumental Half Marathon. And I thought, if I can do a half, why not the whole thing?
Of course. Now, Dave, let me ask, when you ran when you were younger versus after this injury, was there a different appreciation for running? I mean, in other words, like you're like, oh my God, I didn't know if I'd ever do that. And
yeah, I think so. There are two things that happened. One is I had to make adjustments for the fact that I had a spinal fusion and the fact that I was a lot older. So I changed the way I ran, which was instead of bouncing up and down as much, I would focus more on running forward as opposed to bouncing. I would walk when I needed to.
So you're trying to limit the trauma to the fusion site? Is that
yes, absolutely. And I also changed the way I trained, which was I never ran 2 days in a row. Because in my 50s, I needed to make sure that I was giving my body enough time to recover.
And what about from a nutritional standpoint? Was there anything that you addressed in that way?
Yeah, there was a lesson I learned, is you can out-eat any exercise program. Trust me, I've done it. That I had to, even if I was running, I had to be conscious of making sure that what I was eating was good quality. And that as I got older, my metabolism slows down. And I need to make better choices all along the way. So what I could do in my 20s, I couldn't do in my 50s.
Dave, talk to me about your book. Who is your book for?
Sure.
Who did you write it for?
Well, the first person I wrote it for was me, because I needed to figure out how to tell the story. When I would talk to people about the incident, I would hear, you ought to write a book about that. And I said, yeah, I need to get around to that. But it took me 5 years post the accident to figure out how to tell that story in a way that somebody else might find it useful. Because when most people hear it, or a story like that, they say, wow, that's great for you, but what does it have to do with me? So I wrote it for anybody who runs into, who has a setback in their life, because everybody has obstacles they want to overcome. Everybody has things that happen to them, and everybody has places that they want to go. And
Dave, what was the most surprising thing you found out about this recovery in terms of how you personally dealt with it and what it brought out in you or your viewpoint? Was there anything that surprised yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, because I've always had a bucket list of things that I want to do. And I've been pretty good about knowing how to set a goal and how to go after it. But what I found was the hardest thing about recovering from the accident or going after the marathon goal wasn't that journey itself. The hardest thing was getting off my butt, getting off the couch, and getting out the door. And that led me to the title of the book, because the hardest thing to do is to get out the door. Once you do, the rest is easy. And I found that getting up and getting in motion every day made me a lot more likely to continue along that path than to have some, goal out there in the future, because the future is always out there, but it's what you do today that helps you move toward that.
So like take baby steps, but just get started, whatever it is. Would that be a
Yeah,
takeaway?
it gets once you get started, it's like when you're sitting in your car and you're trying at a stoplight and you try to turn the wheel, it's really hard. But if you're going down the road at highway speeds, you can turn the car just by using your finger. So once you're in motion, it becomes a lot easier to adjust your direction in the direction you want to go.
I totally get that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's actually fairly hard for a lot of people to do, right? I mean, even myself at times, where you're just like, all right, I want to get there. And you start thinking, all right, you know what I want to do? I want to run like 20 marathons and I want to blah, blah, blah. And you really like don't even get up to go to the refrigerator or something like that. You can't even, right?
Well, yeah, it's the laws of physics apply to internal things as well. It's, inertia is an object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, and until acted on by an outside force. You can also act on it by an inside force by making that decision to get up and get moving. And if you take a small enough step, that is a lot easier to get yourself in motion. And then once you get yourself in motion, again, it becomes a lot easier to move in the direction you want to go.
Now, talking about those outside influences that slow you down, stop that inertia. Were there any people that surrounded you who slowed you down, or how did you deal with people that said you'd be careful, slow down, don't do that? You know what I mean? Like things that would maybe slow you down. Did you run
Yeah,
into that at all?
you've got to pick your company wisely, and to look for people who will be supportive of that direction, because very few physicians will recommend that you take up running in your 50s. Because running is hard on you, and I've had to adjust my goals to be age appropriate so that I'm not beating myself up. And if I do want to beat myself up in a marathon, I've got to do it in a smart enough way that I can be healthy all the way through that event. So as I said earlier, I never run 2 days in a row. Try to give myself time to recover. And I always adjust my effort to reflect my actual condition, because there's no benefit in being in an event or being in a race if you're going to get injured during it, and there's no advantage to finishing first if you can't get into the next time. In the book, I write about an event I did called the Assault on Mount Mitchell. It's a bike ride in North Carolina. That it's 102 miles with 11,000 feet of climbing, pretty much all of it in the last 30 miles. So the last 30 miles is climbing up to the top of Mount Mitchell. And I have the distinct honor of being the last official finisher in 2014.
Dave, amazing. What did the doctor that did the surgery on you, what did he say when you came back and said, I ran a marathon. I did this bike thing. I did.
He was pretty impressed. But what I've tried to do is to temper that, to say, I am trying to be smart about this so that I don't aggravate the previous injury, because I don't want to damage the good work that he did.
And was there any damage after this to the injury? Did that act up? Was there pain in the site or?
Not really pain. The only long-term effects I have since the accident, there's really nothing wrong with the fusion since then. Because I am 59 now, so age, time, and gravity do take their toll. I have had some additional nerve pain in L3, L4, and L4, L5, which I am working through treatment on. But what I need to do is make sure, keep my weight down, continue trying to be flexible and keep my core exercises up, and to listen to my doctor, um, because he can help me stay ahead of normal age-related degeneration that we all have to deal with.
Now, Dave, just from speaking with you, I get that you're very goal oriented. So what are your goals for the future in terms of athletics, and are you going to run any more marathons? Are you
That
uh,
that's a good question. In 2018, my daughter and I worked on doing the Disney Marathon weekend, which is in 4 days. You run a 5K, a 10K, a half, and then a full marathon on 4 consecutive days.
how old is your daughter?
She is 22. So
Oh,
she's
that sounds like a lot of fun, huh?
it is a lot of fun. So in 2018, I attempted that, and I did 3 of the 4 events. Um, I was having a lot of IT band issues during the time, so I did not start the marathon. So that's still on my bucket list. Um, and we'll see if I can get back to that. I think the next big thing is I want to get back to doing another century bike ride, another 100-miler. And what I'd like to do is to keep doing this for as long as I can. Um, I want to be an old athlete, which is, I think, a goal for anybody to be.
Sure. Well, you're doing a great job, and thank you for the book and the inspiration. And I think so many people will hear this story, and it'll do away with their excuses for not getting off the couch, right?
Well,
This guy,
and yeah, that's the most important thing, is that once you get out the door, the rest is easy.
what's the name of the book?
It's called Get Out the Door,
Perfect.
and
Huh?
yeah, it will be available on Amazon mid to late November.
We're looking forward to seeing it. I mean, you're a great inspiration, Dave.
Well, thank
And
you.
I'm sorry you went through that, but at least we got an inspirational book that really there'll be a lot of other people out there that, as they're going through their own trials and tribulations, will think about what you went through.
Well, and I think that everybody has, well, even though most people will not go through what I went through, everybody has obstacles that they encounter, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, or financial, or whatever. And everybody has goals they want to go after. So that's where I think my story and their story have a parallel. And hopefully people can share in some of the lessons that I've learned, and hopefully take something from them that is a bit easier on them than it was on me.
Tell me about the journey of writing all this down. How difficult or easy was that to articulate?
Um, just like anything else, the hardest thing to do is to get started. I had to learn a couple things. One is to document everything and to get started writing. And then once I had the story together, is to figure out what is the overall message that I want to convey. And then to work on making sure that structure made sense. And with any big endeavor, it's also important to seek professional help where necessary. So I did hire a good editor who helped me bring that message into one complete package.
Now, when you were training, did you have a training partner?
I had a number of training partners and resources that I used. I hired a coach who worked with me on putting together a running program. I worked with a nutritionist to help me keep track of what I was eating. And it's important to seek out people who do have expertise in the areas that you lack, because that expertise is out there, and it's important to learn from other people's mistakes as opposed to making them on your own, because you will make mistakes, and it's good to have people surrounding you to help you bounce back from those as quickly as possible.
You know, Dave, I tell you, I had suffered a stroke. I'm recovering right now, about 2.5 years ago. And
Mhm.
I actually was a little bit disappointed in some of the physical therapy. It just was not aggressive enough. I ended up hiring a trainer that had actually been in the Miss Olympia contest. I'm going to
Wow.
interview her at some point. But the same concept. It was like you want somebody that's professional, that will push you, but also will understand the level of dedication that you need to really achieve whatever goal it is. And
Yeah.
that goal is specific to you, right?
Yeah, and I think so. I've been in physical therapy a number of times since 2004, and what I found is the general goal is to get you back to day-to-day functionality, and that's good. It's important, but sometimes you want more than that, and it's important to seek out the people who are going to push you when you need to be pushed, because they know what your overall goal is, as opposed to what uh, a relative standard of care is.
Boy, I
And
love
nothing,
that.
yeah,
Absolutely. That's what I found. Instead of actually listening to you and saying, "Hey, what's your goal?" Like, you could easily dismiss, "Yeah, you want to run a marathon. Sure, sure."
oh
Right?
yeah,
We just want you to be able to stand up, that,
oh,
and then
oh yeah. Once I can get in and out of the car, once I can walk so many feet or whatever without pain, then that job. And again, no disrespect, that job is done. They have done what they needed to do. But if you want more, sometimes you've got to seek out the resources who can take you from where you are to where you want to go.
Mhm. Good.
I love that. I ran into the exact same thing
Mhm.
where it was just really hard to find somebody that would actually sit with you and go, "Listen, I got what your goal is. I'm duplicating it, and I'm going to get you there. And it's going to take a little more than we normally do, but we will get you there."
Yeah. And the important thing as an individual is to be able to work with somebody who knows when to push you and knows when to back off a little bit to keep you engaged. Because sometimes it's easy to want to quit, but also sometimes it's easy to push hard enough to aggravate a particular injury. Um, and it takes sometimes somebody with an outside perspective to say, if you keep going this way, you're going to set yourself back. Balanced by, look, if you want to go here, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z.
Dave, even once you got started, were there moments when you doubted it yourself, where you started to wane from that?
Pretty much every day. There's a saying that I had that I've never come back from a ride or a run where I felt bad, but I have felt bad at the start of a lot of them. Um, once I, either started jogging or started riding on the bike, I'm like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. Um, Especially if you're outside and it starts raining, um, that it can be miserable out there. But if you keep at it, when you come back, is like, wow, I'm glad I did that. Um, but it's hard to visualize that before the fact. It's when you get done that feeling sticks around. Um, there was a one time I used to ride my bike into work from time to time, and on the day before Thanksgiving, I rode into work and it started raining. I thought, I'm just going to leave my bike in the garage and take the bus home. I decided to ride home, and it was like 42 degrees in pouring down rain, and I was freezing and almost hypothermic by the time I got home. But man, it made for one heck of a story. And I was glad I did it, because it showed that I could push myself a little bit further than I thought I could.
Dave, what I love about this is not just lessons that we can take for running a marathon. This is really life lessons that it applies to anything, I
Oh
imagine.
yeah, oh yeah. It's your mind will quit on you before your body will, um, and you can go a lot further than you thought you could if you just keep going.
It's really a mindset that, I mean,
Yeah.
I know I ran into that even going through medical school. There were times when you'd be studying for days on end, you're like, you know what, I'm done. And
Oh
you
yeah,
just
and
quit.
and there are days when progress seems invisible, or that you feel like you're not making any progress at all, or that you're even going backwards. But if you keep at it, progress is never in a straight line. But over time, if you look at a big enough picture, you can look back and say, wow, look how far I've come.
And would you do that, or would you measure, like, how would you do that? How would you actually quantify, I got to win on that, look at that? Like, how would you do that for yourself?
There's some, nowadays there are great tools out there that allow you to track your progress with not that much effort. Whether you use a Garmin or a Fitbit or whatever tool you decide to use, you can track your weight, your body composition, your times on your different rides or runs. You can check your biometrics for your body fat percentage or your resting heart rate. All those tools are very easy to measure these days, and you can see.
So Dave, how important was that? How important was it to have these measurements that you could then compare and see this little progress that would ultimately end up in a larger win? But you could, on the way, you're getting these incremental little wins, so you could go, wow, look at that.
Yeah, I tend to be fairly numbers focused, so it was very important for me. One of the things that I've seen, especially people who are wanting to lose weight, one thing you'll hear is, don't look at the scale or don't weigh yourself every day. And there's a reason for that, because people tend to get micro focused on what happened today. I take the opposite approach, which is measure everything you can, but don't look at it on a daily basis. So record everything you can, but look at it in the big picture.
Now, Dave, is that going to be the name of your second book? Measure everything you can, but don't look at it every day.
That's an idea, isn't it?
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Great concept.
Well, because if you look at body weight, for example, depending on how much water you're retaining, your weight can go up 5 pounds in a day. So if you look at it on
plus, I imagine if you're lifting weights or doing that, you're also gaining some muscle mass, which is a good thing. So you don't want to necessarily just look at the weight. You would want to look at your body fat composition and
you want to pay attention to the right things. Data is just that. It is data. It's a piece of information. What you want to get from that data is something useful. So look at things in terms of the big picture, look in terms of the longer time frame, and you can see what those trends are telling you.
Dave, somebody reading your book, when they're done with it, what would you like them to say to you? Like, ideally, what would be the thing you'd like to hear?
I think there are two things I'd like to hear. One is, this is how I see this story in my own life. Because if somebody says, hey, this story was inspiring, or this story was great about you, I was like, thank you, because I'm grateful that they enjoyed the story. But what's more inspiring to me is what they do as a result. So even on the last page of the book, what I do ask people to do is to send me their story of what they've decided to take on, what challenge they've decided to go after, or what change they've decided to make in their life, because that's far more inspiring to me, is what they've done as a result.
Dave, when does the book come out?
It's going to be mid to late November. So it'll be out before the holidays, and it'll be available at an Amazon website near you.
All right. And again, the name of the book
is Get Out the Door. And if you go to my website at www.hollyworks.com, that's HOLLIWORKS.com, you can download the first chapter for free.
Wow, that's awesome. David, thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for the lessons. And I really think a lot of people are going to do a lot better in their lives, because I just love this interview. I love the message, and I think it's important. I think giving people those little wins, making sure they measure the right thing is
Well,
key.
and as I found, the hardest thing to do is get out the door. Once you do, the rest is easy.
Dave, thank you very much, sir. How would people
Thank-
that want to get in touch with you, is there a way that they would get in touch with you?
Yes, they can go to my website at hollyworks.com. And that is my social media handle as well. So HOLLIWORKS. And that's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, pretty much everywhere.
Dave, I was kidding about that second book, but what do you see the future for yourself? What
There's always another mountain to climb. The next, I've got the outline set up for my next book, which I'll be starting in January. The next story is going to be about my son and his challenges. He's 25 now, but when he was 3, he was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, and it's about his journey from being told that he couldn't do this or couldn't do that, and being told that he couldn't even ride a bike. And I don't like being told you can't do something. And so it took me 2 years, but I taught him not only how to ride a bike, but since then he's done 5 century rides with me. He's an Eagle Scout. He graduated from college. He's on the road to being completely independent. And so the concept for that book is, once you get in motion, which is how you learn to ride a bike, once you get in motion, there's no stopping you. So that the title of that book will be called "There's No Stopping You," and it talks about how moving forward and gaining momentum gives you balance and will take you anywhere you want to go.
Now, Dave, I understand looking at your own personal sort of challenges.
Mhm.
How difficult is it, and which is difficult enough, but looking at a child's, that's got to be a whole different level, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, with the whole autism field is something we're learning about every day. We're learning that people all have different abilities and different challenges. And as I'll say in that book, is we tried 1,000 things that didn't work, and a few that did. And
what were some of the things that did work?
One is persistence, and that comes across in the current book. Is even if something doesn't work now, it doesn't mean it won't work in the future. So you need to be tenacious and persistent. You need to be willing to adjust your approach if necessary. And you need to be able to refine what your idea of success is. Because something that would be viewable as a success for me, that may be the complete wrong set of goals for somebody else. So your goals need to be highly individualized to what is doable for you, and to not sell yourself short, but be willing to adjust that framework where you need to.
Now, Dave, I have a few friends that have children that have autism.
Mhm.
It seems to be more and more noticeable as something that's been diagnosed. Now, why is that? Is that true? And then why is that?
I think there are a number of reasons. One is that the criteria are being refined over time because it's something we're learning more about. So somebody like myself in growing up in the 60s and 70s might not have been diagnosed on the spectrum at the time. Today I might be, because a lot of the qualities my son has, I have. And I've learned to work around those, but it took me a long time to figure out how to do that. And they've also discovered that autism is very much a spectrum disorder. There are people who have very mild incidences on the spectrum, and people have very severe incidents of those behaviors and attributes. So, as I said, there are 1,000 things that might not work and a few that do, but you have to try those 1,000 to get to the few that do.
And Dave, give me like an idea of something that does not work.
Okay. For my son, is being rigid and inflexible on routines, to saying something has to be done this way. Because, my son has some fine motor issues that make it very difficult for him to do things that require high level of dexterity. That doesn't mean that he can't do other things to compensate for that. So you have to learn what their gifts and attributes are and where their challenges are, and say, okay, let's focus over here where they're good and put most of our effort here, and only compensate where they have the big challenges. Because if you try to fix everything over here, it's going to be a lot harder to make progress. So you make progress where you can, and that helps you compensate for where you have weak points.
And it sounds like the same concept of just get started as well. Just start going in that direction.
Oh yeah, you can't be afraid of failure. You have to just get out there and try something and be willing to stick with it and find out where does it lead. So that's kind of where I'm going with the second book. It is an outgrowth of the current one, and more of the life lessons that I've figured out since that first story.
Do you see yourself possibly becoming an inspirational speaker at some point?
Well, I do speak to groups today, and I do a combination of things. One is some of my messages are inspirational and motivational, but I just like telling stories. So I've been on stage at the Moth and Story District, as well as the DC Improv and Stand Up New York, telling stories. And it's something that's always sparked my imagination, and I have a lot of fun doing it. So as long as it's fun, I'll keep doing it.
Well, that's awesome. And we greatly need more people like yourself to inspire us, and especially in areas, like I said, like autism, where, like you said, it may be being diagnosed more for whatever reason, but based on a different criteria.
Right.
And hearing that you can actually push through that in many ways and not give up, because I imagine there are some people that are telling people that have been diagnosed, that's it, you're done, you're not getting any better.
And those are some of the messages that we got when Jamie was younger. And I don't believe in the no-win scenario, to paraphrase Captain Kirk, that there's always some way to get it done. But you have to be flexible in determining what that framework looks like. Because the idea of success for me is very likely very different from the idea of success for you. I mean, you've got different challenges than I do. And for me to impose my ideas on you would be just as wrong as doing it the opposite direction. So with raising a child with autism and raising into a young adult with autism, is you've got to be willing to define what that scenario is that determines success.
Now, I also have to imagine that your wife in this case has got to have a fairly similar viewpoint, so you're both on the same page.
Well, you do have to work together as a family, because that is one of the big strains on families, is having a child with a disability. And one of the leading causes of divorce is having a child with a major disability. So you definitely have to be aware of the impact that it has on a family.
And as far as maybe one day addressing that concept of dealing with relationships as they relate to, because everything is a relationship, right? I mean, even running a marathon, you're dealing with friends and family that probably, meaning well, don't want you to get hurt, don't want their fusion to get undone or whatever.
Oh yeah.
imposing their viewpoint on you. So how do you deal with that? How do you actually turn them around? How do you influence them so they're not stopping you, especially when it's fairly easy if it's a rainy day outside and you really don't want to go running anyway. And a friend comes over and goes, it's raining out, it's cold, sit down on the couch. It's pretty easy to go into agreement with that, right?
Well, yeah, it's like everything in life. Everything in life is moderation, is learning how to balance what you as an individual want versus what you as part of a larger community need to do. So you need to be aware of the impact of what you're going through is on the relationships that you have, and to make sure that you're keeping those things in balance.
Dave, thank you so much for coming on the other side of adversity today. And we're very proud that you made it to the other side of adversity and that you've done so well with your life and you've overcome your challenges and you did it with a smile and you did it. I mean, we're seeing you now on the other side. I'm sure if we saw you while you were going through it, there were those days when you weren't smiling quite so much, but
Oh, absolutely.
how you got through it.
Yeah, there have been days, and there continue to be days where it's a challenge. But it's, as I say, I can't dance. I got to do something. As long as I'm moving forward, I'm a happy guy, and that's what I challenge your listeners to, is to find the thing that sparks your imagination and go for it. Don't be afraid of falling down, because we all do, and just get started. Once you get started, you'll find it a lot easier to keep going.
And I think the first thing they should get started is go to Amazon and get a copy of your book, right?
When it's released, absolutely. For right now, just go to my website and you'll be able to download the first chapter. And once you do sign up there, I'll have your name on a list and I'll be able to notify people of the exact release date.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dr. Dan.
Really great having you on the show and really great hearing your story and very inspiring.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.